You know the moment. It doesn't happen during the argument. It happens later, in the shower, on the drive home, at 3 in the morning, staring at the ceiling while your mind replays the scene like a courtroom drama you already lost. You see it clearly now, the sentence you should have said, the calm response that would have stopped them cold, the line that would have flipped the power dynamic instantly. But you didn't say it. You froze. You reacted. And because you reacted, you surrendered the frame. Here's the first lie society teaches you, that arguments are about logic, that if you explain yourself well enough, if you're reasonable enough, if you present the facts cleanly, the other person will understand. That is fiction. Arguments are not about truth, they are about dominance. They are about who controls the emotional gravity of the room. The moment you defend yourself emotionally, you've already lost. Because now you're playing their game, on their terrain, under their rules. Centuries ago, Niccolò Machiavelli saw this with terrifying clarity. He understood something most people still resist. Human beings are not rational first. We are hierarchical first. We don't respect the person who is right. We respect the person who appears unshaken, the one who stays cold while others burn. Most people collapse in conflict. They justify. They explain. They raise their voice, hoping volume will replace authority. They bleed their power onto the floor because they want one thing desperately, to be understood. But listen carefully. You are not here to be understood. You are here to be respected. And respect is not negotiated. It is demonstrated. In this series, you are not learning how to communicate better. You are learning how to dismantle control without raising your voice. How to end an argument not by winning it, but by making it irrelevant. These are not clever comebacks. They are psychological circuit breakers, moves that shut down the other person's access to your nervous system. And once you understand them, something changes permanently. You stop seeing confrontations as threats. You start seeing them as structures, patterns that can be interrupted, rerouted, collapsed. You stop feeling heat. You start feeling distance. And distance is power. Let's begin with the first blade. When someone attacks you, really attacks you, they are rarely stable. Anger is almost never about the surface issue. Anger is camouflage. It hides fear, insecurity, loss of control. They raise their voice because they want you to raise yours. They provoke because they want emotional reciprocity. They want you pulled into the mud so the playing field levels. If you get angry, you validate their chaos. You confirm that this situation deserves emotional escalation. Machiavelli would tell you never fight on the enemy's terrain. So instead of engaging the content of their attack, you shift the frame entirely. You don't respond immediately. You pause. 2 seconds. Then you look at them, not with hostility, not with smugness, but with calm, almost clinical concern. And you say, "Are you okay?" That's it. No explanation, no defense, no counterattack. This question does something violent to the psychological structure of the moment. They were expecting resistance. They were preparing for impact. Instead, you reframe them as unstable, and yourself as composed. You are no longer the target. You are the observer. In one sentence, the hierarchy flips. You've placed them in the position of the emotional child, and yourself in the position of the adult. Not superior through arrogance, superior through control. If they double down, "Of course I'm not okay. You did this, you said that." You don't retreat. You maintain the same tone, same stillness. "I hear you, But this level of anger doesn't match the situation. Is something else going on? Now watch what happens internally. You've forced self-awareness under pressure. You've introduced doubt into their own emotional certainty. This is ruthless. Not because it's loud, but because it's surgical. A king does not scream at a peasant. A parent does not scream at a toddler. The one who screams is the one who feels powerless. By calmly naming their emotion, you expose that powerlessness without accusing them. You've handed them a mirror, and most people cannot tolerate seeing themselves out of control. They will lower their voice. They have to, because if they continue raging after you've expressed concern, they confirm your diagnosis in front of everyone. You didn't defeat them. You made them collapse under their own excess. This is the first principle. You win by refusing the role assigned to you. Now understand something deeper. This move works not because of the words, but because of the state behind them. If your heart rate is high, it fails. If your eyes are frantic, it fails. If your tone carries resentment, it fails. The technique is the blade. Your nervous system is the hand holding it. Power is not aggression. Power is stillness under provocation. As you move forward, you'll notice something unsettling. People who relied on emotional volatility to control you begin to malfunction around you. Their scripts no longer work. Their pressure produces no reaction. You've stepped out of the dance, and once you leave the dance floor, the music becomes irrelevant. This is only the beginning. Now that you understand how to collapse emotional aggression, we move to a different enemy. Not the explosive one, but the chronic one. The person who argues not because they're angry, but because they enjoy friction. The intellectual bully, the provocateur. They bring up politics at dinner. They challenge every statement you make. They don't want resolution. They want engagement. Because engagement feeds them. Machiavelli warned against wasting resources on battles that yield no profit. And arguing with someone who thrives on opposition is pure bankruptcy. These people don't care if they're right. They care that you're reacting. So the strategy is not to out-argue them. It's to starve them. When they finish their rant, when they drop the bait designed to hook your ego, you don't counter with facts. You don't correct them. You don't defend your position. You look at them calmly and say, "That's an interesting perspective." Then you disengage. You take a sip of your drink. You check your phone. You turn your body slightly away. That phrase is not neutral. It's a coffin. It says, "I heard you, I evaluated it, and I found it unworthy of my energy." On the surface, it's polite. Underneath, it's devastating. You didn't challenge their idea. You diminished its importance. Most people don't realize this, but significance is the true currency of conversation. The moment you deny it, the argument dies. They will feel it instantly. They'll push again. So you agree with me? You don't think I'm wrong? You repeat the wall. I think it's a perspective, and you're entitled to it. Same tone, same stillness. What you've done is removed yourself as a source of supply. You are no longer friction. You are no longer resistance. You are stone. And stone is boring to someone who feeds on reaction. This teaches people how to treat you, not through confrontation, but through consequence. Eventually, they stop pressing, not because they agree with you, but because you are no longer rewarding their behavior. Being boring to a narcissist is not weakness, it is immunity. Now we move into something even more powerful. Silence. Western culture is terrified of silence. We're trained to fill gaps instantly, to explain, respond, smooth over discomfort. But silence is not emptiness. Silence is pressure. When someone insults you, challenges you, or asks a loaded question, your instinct is to reply immediately. That instinct is fear. Fear of social death. Fear of looking weak. Fear of losing control. But Machiavelli understood this. The one who speaks less is feared more. So, instead of answering, you pause. You lock eyes. You say nothing. 4 seconds. Count them internally. 1, 2, 3, 4. In an argument, 4 seconds feels like eternity. Their mind starts spiraling. Did I go too far? Why aren't they reacting? What are they thinking? That vacuum is where power shifts. You didn't surrender the frame. You seized it. Often the silence alone ends the exchange. But if you speak, you don't strike, you redirect. Could you repeat that? Say it calmly, slowly. Now they must say the rude thing again, without momentum, without heat. Most people can't. They'll rephrase, soften it, backpedal. Because repeating aggression makes it sound uglier the second time. They're now explaining themselves to you. And he who explains loses. Time became your weapon. You forced them to sit inside their own discomfort. Most people cannot tolerate this. They'll apologize just to escape the tension. Silence is not absence of power. It's concentration. Now comes a counterintuitive move. The agreement trap. When someone attacks your character, they expect resistance. They brace for impact. You're selfish. You're difficult. You're arrogant. So you don't resist. You agree. You're right. I am being difficult. I can see why it feels that way. Say it plainly, without sarcasm, without apology. You've just removed the weapon from their hands. An insult only works if it wounds. If you accept it calmly, it loses all force. But here's the precision. You agree with the moment, not your identity. I can be arrogant sometimes. I am being difficult about this. That's not submission. That's confidence. Only someone secure can admit a flaw without collapsing. Then you pivot. I'm being difficult because this matters. So how do we solve it? You've transformed conflict into negotiation. They wanted blood. You gave structure. They wanted chaos. You gave direction. You didn't protect your ego. You demonstrated its absence. And nothing confuses an attacker more than someone they can't emotionally injure. At this point, something subtle happens. You stop feeling hunted. You stop feeling defensive. You realize most arguments are not battles of intellect, but tests of composure. And composure is a muscle. The more you train it, the more automatic it becomes. You are no longer reacting to people. You are observing them, and observation is the beginning of control. This is the midpoint of the shift, from emotional participant to strategic presence. Now we move from defense into exposure, because not all attacks are loud. Some are quiet, polite, wrapped in humor or concern. These are the passive-aggressive types, the manipulators who never strike openly. They jab and retreat, then hide behind plausible deniability. If you're offended, you're too sensitive. I was just joking. I'm only trying to help. They operate in fog. So the way you dismantle them is not with emotion, but with light. You don't let the comment slide. You don't argue the content. You interrupt the strategy. You ask one question. What's your goal with that comment? Then you stop talking. That question is surgical. It doesn't accuse. It doesn't escalate. It demands clarity. And manipulators hate clarity. If they say, "I was just joking," you don't smile. You don't reassure them. You stay serious. Explain the joke. I don't get it. Now they're trapped. They must either admit the cruelty or look foolish explaining why disrespect is funny. Most will squirm. Change subject. Retreat. If they say, "I'm just trying to help," you respond calmly. It doesn't feel helpful. It feels critical. If you want to help, do it differently. That's it. You've just set a boundary in real time, without anger, without justification. Machiavelli said one must be a fox to recognize traps. This question is the fox. It exposes the board before you step into it. And here's the key. The awkwardness belongs to them, not you. They created the tension. You simply turned on the lights. If the room feels uncomfortable, it's because the mess was already there. Now we escalate not in volume, but in hierarchy. Disappointment. Anger is hot. Disappointment is cold. Anger says, "You hurt me." Disappointment says, "You failed me." When someone lies to you, disrespects you, or behaves childishly, don't raise your voice. Lower it. Look at them not furious, not shocked, but tired. Then say, "I expected better from you." That sentence carries weight because it implies something devastating. They once held a higher position in your eyes, and they just lost it. You've placed yourself above the exchange, parent to child, judge to defendant. You're not fighting for respect. You're withdrawing it. "I thought you were different." "I didn't think you were this kind of person." Then you leave. No lecture, no argument, just absence. This triggers something primal. People can handle anger. They can argue with rage. But disappointment targets identity. They will chase you, explain themselves, try to regain standing. The dynamic flips. They seek validation. You become the gatekeeper. This is soft power. You don't force change. You make them want it. But use this move sparingly. It fractures bonds. Only deploy it when respect has already been broken. Now we arrive at the edge, the final threshold. There are some people you cannot win against because winning is what they feed on. Narcissists, chaos agents, energy vampires. As long as you engage, they win. Machiavelli understood something brutal. Attention is the most valuable currency on earth, and you can stop spending it. When you realize the conversation is circular, when you see they are committed to misunderstanding, you deploy the final move. The nuclear option. You gather your things, you stand, you look at them not angry, not emotional, just finished, and you say, "You can believe whatever you want. I don't care enough to argue." Then you leave. Shorter version. "You're right, I'm done." This is not surrender. This is devaluation. You are saying, "You are not worth my effort." For someone addicted to control, this is psychological death. They will yell at your back, mock you, provoke you, keep walking. Your silence as you leave is the loudest sound they will ever hear. This establishes something final. You control access to you, and anyone who disrespects your peace is removed from the environment. Feared, in Machiavellian terms, does not mean terror. It means contained. They know you have lines. They know you cannot be baited. They know that if they push too far, you vanish. And vanishing is power. But here is the truth most people miss. None of this works if your internal state is frantic. The words are only 10%. The delivery is everything. Low heart rate, still eyes, measured breath. When they speed up, you slow down. When they get loud, you get quiet. Storm versus mountain. The storm rages. The mountain remains. Most people live as leaves, blown by moods, reactions, pressure. A boss yells, they shrink. A partner argues, they burn. They are puppets. These techniques cut the strings. It will feel unnatural at first. Your old self will panic. It will want to explain, to be liked, to be understood. Let that self die. The new you does not explain. The new you observes, decides, speaks once, then lets silence finish the work. Here is the paradox. The more willing you are to end the conversation, the more control you have over it. The less you care about winning, the more often you do. The darkness of silence is not emptiness, it is space. And in that space, you finally become untouchable. Now listen closely, because this is where everything you've learned locks together. Up until now, these techniques may sound like tactics, moves you deploy when conflict appears. But the real transformation happens when you realize this is not about arguments at all. It's about identity. Most people lose arguments long before words are spoken because their inner posture is submissive. They walk into interactions already seeking approval, already afraid of tension, already primed to explain. That inner posture leaks. It leaks through tone, through timing, through the urgency in their voice, and others feel it instantly. Machiavelli understood that power is not situational. It is carried. You don't turn it on. You become it. That's why the deepest rule underneath all 7 responses is this. You must break your addiction to being understood. The need to explain is not virtue. It is exposure. Every time you over-explain, you hand the other person leverage. You reveal your emotional investment. You tell them where to press. Notice this pattern in your own life. When someone questions you and you rush to clarify, when someone misunderstands you and you panic, when someone accuses you and you defend immediately, that urgency is not logic. It's fear. Fear of being misjudged. Fear of losing social standing. Fear of rejection. But the man who cannot tolerate being misunderstood can always be controlled. This is why silence terrifies people. Silence does not mean you lost. Silence means you refuse the frame. And when you refuse the frame, the other person is forced to sit alone with their assumptions. That's when cracks appear. They talk more. They justify. They reveal intent. You learn more by saying nothing than you ever could by arguing. This is why the calmest person in the room always ends up with invisible authority. Others start checking themselves around him, lowering their voice, choosing words carefully, not because he demanded respect, but because his reactions are no longer predictable. Predictability is the enemy of power. When people know exactly how you'll respond, they can plan around you, trigger you, bait you, pull you. But when your responses become rare, deliberate, and controlled, you introduce uncertainty. And uncertainty forces respect. Now here's the final integration. These techniques are not meant to be used constantly. A man who is always cold becomes brittle. A man who never engages becomes irrelevant. Machiavelli never taught rigidity. He taught adaptability. You choose when to be warm. You choose when to be distant. You choose when to speak and when to disappear. That choice is sovereignty. You are no longer reacting to emotional weather. You are setting climate. And once you feel that shift internally, arguments stop being personal. Insults lose their sting. Provocations feel transparent. Conflict becomes data. You don't ask, how do I win this? You ask, what does this reveal? Because the moment you stop needing to win, you stop being vulnerable. This is why the strongest response is often withdrawal. Not dramatic, not angry, just final. The willingness to walk away communicates something words never can. that your peace is not negotiable, and people treat you accordingly. This is the discipline Machiavelli hinted at, but never spelled out plainly. Power is not domination over others, it is command over yourself. The man who can slow his breath while being attacked has already won a war most people don't even know they're fighting. And once you master that, you no longer fear arguments. You outgrow them. This is the awakening most people never reach. Because after the techniques, after the silence, after the withdrawals and the frame shifts, there is a final realization that changes how you move through the world. Forever. You were never losing arguments because you lacked intelligence. You were losing because you were emotionally available, accessible, reactive, predictable. Society trains you to believe that being open is strength, that explaining yourself is maturity, that meeting aggression with engagement is courage. Machiavelli would dismantle that illusion in seconds. He understood that the world does not reward emotional honesty. It rewards emotional control. And control begins the moment you stop needing closure from people who benefit from your confusion. Think about how many arguments you've had that changed nothing. How many explanations were offered to people who were never listening? How many hours of your life were drained not by violence, but by pointless emotional labor? That wasn't bad luck. That was lack of boundaries. The final lesson is this. You don't end arguments by speaking better. You end them by becoming unreachable. Not physically, psychologically. The man who is no longer reactive cannot be dragged. The man who does not chase validation cannot be baited. The man who can walk away without explanation becomes a force others must respect, even if they don't like him. This is why the most powerful individuals rarely argue. They don't need to. Their presence already sets terms. When they speak, it's concise. When they're silent, it's deliberate. When they leave, it's permanent. And people feel that, not consciously, instinctively. Here's the paradox Machiavelli understood at the deepest level. The more willing you are to lose access to people, the more power you hold over yourself. The fear of abandonment is the chain. Once it breaks, no one can pull you. This doesn't make you cruel. It makes you sovereign. You still choose kindness, but now it's selective. You still listen, but now it's intentional. You still engage, but only where there is mutual respect. Everyone else gets distance, silence, absence. And absence, when chosen, is not loss, it's leverage. This is why the final victory is not dominance over others. It's independence from their reactions, when insults no longer trigger you, when misunderstanding no longer panics you, when walking away feels natural instead of frightening. You've crossed the threshold. You're no longer trying to control the room. You are controlling access to yourself. And that is the kind of power no argument can threaten. So remember this as you step back into the world. You don't need the last word. You don't need agreement. You don't need to be seen as right. You only need to remain unshaken. Because the man who can leave the table without flipping it is the man who truly owns the room. And once you become that man, arguments don't end. They dissolve. Before this ends, there is one last shift you need to make. Not in technique, not in language, but in identity. Because everything you've learned collapses into a single realization that most people never reach. You were never meant to win arguments. You were meant to outgrow them. Winning still keeps you inside the frame. Winning still means you care enough to stay. Winning still means you are emotionally invested in how the other person sees you. And that is the quiet trap. From the moment you learn to speak, you were conditioned to explain yourself, to clarify intentions, to smooth tension, to prove you're reasonable, fair, good. You were praised for being understandable, rewarded for being agreeable, loved for being accessible. but no one ever told you the cost. Every explanation trained you to leak authority. Every justification trained others to question you. Every emotional reaction trained people where your weak points were. You didn't lose power overnight. You bled it out slowly, one unnecessary response at a time. This is why silence feels radical now. Because silence threatens the old survival strategy. The old self believed, if I don't explain, I'll be misunderstood. If I don't respond, I'll be judged. If I don't engage, I'll be abandoned. Machiavelli would look at that fear and call it a leash. Because the man who fears being misunderstood will always speak when silence would protect him. And the man who fears being abandoned will always stay when leaving would elevate him. The moment you stop fearing those outcomes, something irreversible happens. You begin to move from center. Arguments stop feeling urgent. Disrespect stops feeling personal. Provocation stops feeling dangerous. Not because people change, but because you do. You realize that most conflict is not about truth or resolution. It's about control. Who sets the emotional tempo? Who reacts first? Who feels compelled to continue? And the moment you understand that, you stop playing offense or defense. You start choosing exits. This is the final form of power. Not domination, not intimidation, but the ability to withdraw without explanation and without guilt. That ability terrifies people, because when you withdraw calmly, you remove their leverage. You deny them reaction, validation, closure. They are left alone with themselves. And most people cannot tolerate that mirror. You will notice the shift immediately. People talk more around you, explain themselves unprompted, backtrack mid-sentence, not because you demanded respect, but because your silence created pressure. Pressure exposes. You will also notice who disappears. Those who only thrived on your emotional availability will fade. Those who only felt powerful when you were reactive will lose interest. Let them go. Their absence is not loss. It is confirmation. Here is the truth no one says plainly. You do not owe emotional access to anyone who cannot respect your peace. You do not owe explanations to people committed to misunderstanding you. You do not owe arguments to people who feed on chaos. Your attention is not a public resource. It is a private asset. And assets are protected, not shared indiscriminately. This does not make you cold. It makes you precise. You still choose kindness, but now it has borders. You still listen, but now it has filters. You still speak, but now it has weight. Every word you say matters because you no longer say many. And when you do speak, it lands differently, because silence sharpened it. At some point, you will realize something subtle and unsettling. You no longer feel the urge to correct people. You no longer rush to defend your reputation. You no longer panic when someone misreads you, because you understand something deeper than agreement. You understand position. You know who you are without consensus. You know where you stand without applause. You know when to stay and when to disappear. That certainty cannot be shaken by arguments. This is why the most powerful individuals are often misinterpreted. They don't rush to clean it up. They don't chase clarity. They let time, consistency, and absence do the work. And time always sides with composure. Here is the final paradox Machiavelli lived by. The less you need to win, the more control you have. The less you need approval, the more respect follows. The less you explain, the more authority you project. Because the man who can walk away without flipping the table owns the table. So the next time tension rises, remember this. You don't need the perfect line. You don't need the sharp comeback. You don't need to be understood. You only need to remain centered. Slow your breath. Still your eyes. Say less or say nothing at all. And if the moment calls for it, leave. Not in anger, not in drama, not as a performance, but as a decision. Because the highest form of dominance is not staying to prove a point. It is knowing that your presence is optional and choosing when it is no longer offered. Once you live from that place, arguments don't escalate. They evaporate. And the world adjusts to you.